Welcome to the Longevity Optimization Podcast, where we discuss longevity, optimal health, nutrition, peak performance, cognitive excellence, and so much more. JJ, it's a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thrilled to be here with you.
I know. And today we're going to be talking about all things women's health. We're going to talk about, you're, one of the most fit women that I've seen.
I am still not where I want to be. I got to tell you, I'm more fired up at 61 about fitness. And I started lifting weights when I was 16 with the high school football team because there were no gyms and health clubs for women back then except for figure salons.
Have you seen, this is so funny, but have you seen some of these like old ads resurfacing of
Yes.
like what women were doing?
Yes.
What a joke. She's like getting out of bed, putting on high heels, and then just doing like a leg raise.
Right.
No weights, no nothing.
Yep. Yes. Well, because it was very unfeminine to build muscle. And sadly, I feel like that is still out there.
Yeah. I think, I hear a lot of that too, just in the gym. So how I find my gym partners is I pay attention to what woman is the most fit and is the most like serious in the gym, right? And then I just go up to her and I say, hey, do you want to be friends? And do you want to work out together? But I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I see a lot of women with like 2-pound weights. I'm like, what are you doing?
Doing them forever because they don't want to get big. And then they'll come to me and go, but I want to have arms like yours. I go, well, let me tell you, this morning when I was at the gym doing pull-ups and push-ups and doing as heavy as I possibly could, and it is your metabolic Spanx. It's going to hold everything in tighter, right? And boost your metabolism. So those funny pictures that you saw from years ago, that's what I grew up with. Jazzercise.
Yeah.
The figure salons were like a decade or two before me, but they were still around.
Can you talk about this? Because, I haven't heard about figure
salons. So some of those memes that you see where the women literally have their hair done and they're in high heels and they're lifting these little weights at the gym. And then you would go in there. And the only reason I actually have one of these for the house, because I was in Korea last summer and we were staying at these hotels, and we were staying at a JW Marriott, and the gym at this JW Marriott was the best gym I've ever been to in my life.
Wow.
It's better than an Equinox. It's better than, anything I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was an anomaly. Go to the next hotel, and I forget, it was like an Edition or something. Same thing. And what was crazy in these gyms is that everyone was wearing uniforms, like PE. But the average age, there was all ages in there, but the average age was about probably 70.
Wow.
And they were going after it. However, one of the things they were doing in there was they had this thing you stood on and you put this belt around your waist and it vibrates you.
Okay.
Now, that was what they used to have at figure salons. And so my girlfriend and I were in there and I go, oh, this is really funny. We must get a video of this for social.
Yeah.
Well, I get on this thing, and this thing is the most fabulous thing I've ever felt. It's so good for like lymph massage, and I immediately went online, found one on Amazon, and had it shipped to my house. But these were the things that you used to do, was all the stretching and toning. Toning, that drives me nuts.
Yeah,
I still have to use it sometimes in my YouTube videos because people look for toning.
Yeah.
And then immediately when they click, I'm like, let's talk about toning. What does tone mean? Or they'll talk about getting long, lean muscles. And I think if we could just blow up a big myth about this, because in 40 years of helping people lift weights, I've never once seen a woman get bigger lifting weights.
Yeah.
I've seen a woman get bigger because she's not lifting weights.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's trying to control her weight through diet alone, which we know that if you do that, you become TOFI, thin outside, fat inside, that's sarcopenic obesity, or through just aerobic exercise, which means you're not going to have the muscle either. You basically have the muscle mass of a couch potato.
Yeah.
So if you really want to change your body composition and look fabulous, you lift weights.
Yeah.
And if for some reason along the way of lifting weights, you go, oh my gosh, I don't like the way I look, you stop.
Yeah.
And it goes away.
Yeah.
So
I've never
it's easy.
I agree. And I've worked out with women who work out so hard. I love working out. And they all look amazing. Everybody looks great. Everyone is still small and toned, if we want to say that.
Well, but why do we have to be? And here's the small thing, too. Is everyone wants to be smaller, thinner, smaller.
Yeah,
You know what? why do we keep trying to play small in this? I think it's a metaphor for life. And I go, what if we showed up bigger? What if?
Bigger in the right ways.
Right, bigger in the right ways. When I used to take clients way back when to Gold's Gym in Venice. This was before Gold's Gym had personal trainers.
Yeah.
So you could actually walk in and train people. Now there's like 1,000 personal trainers. But I remember seeing women there, and I was in doctoral school at the time, and my doctoral work was nutrition, exercise science, and aging. And so it was a gerontology focus, right?
That's great.
And I would look at these women at the gym there, and they would be like 70, and I would have died to have their body. Would have killed to have their body. And that's when I looked at the difference, because back then at Gold's Gym, they had 4 bikes up on a loft. No one ever used them.
Oh.
These people did resistance training. And then you look at the difference, the people you saw out running every single day are always at the other gyms on cardio.
Yeah.
And, one of them looks amazing. They're the ones that if they were naked, they look even better. Whereas a lot of people are like, no, let's keep the outfit on, right?
Yeah.
So it is the difference in creating a body composition and knowing how to look at that versus focusing on what a scale weight says to you as validation.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't even really pay attention to the number. Like, a lot of people will ask me, and of course I know what the number is, but to me, I'm more excited to have more muscle mass.
Right.
And looking at things like bone density and, fat mass, stuff like that.
Those are the numbers. So I was literally, when I was in high school, because I'm so tall, I thought I should be a model. And I go to the modeling agency, and they said, you have to lose 20 pounds. Now, you see the way I look right now. This is the way I looked.
Yeah.
So I lost 10 pounds. My dance teacher was like, are you anorexic? What is going on with you? And I made a decision. And that decision, then I think of how lucky I was, because there was a crossroads. I could have kept going with that and been one of the, more emaciated models out there. I went, you know what? I want to be strong, because I saw I couldn't have both.
Yeah.
I could either be strong, do the stuff that I was doing in gymnastics and track, or I could be skinny and I couldn't do any of it. Yeah. And I decided back then to choose strong over skinny. And I hope that's the decision people are starting to make now, because when you do that, so back then I stopped really focusing on scale weight. We didn't have a way to do body comp back then. But, because I looked like such a heavyweight, because I've always been muscular, I just disregarded it until I could start looking at body composition. Then that changed everything for me, because I knew I wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive into, and I'm so, it's amazing to be able to talk to people like you, because I have so many questions from my audience all the time. Like, what happens? How do you maintain a good figure when you're in your late 40s or early 50s? And
you have an even better body in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond.
Exactly.
That's an even better question to ask, right?
I mean, I love that. I think, every year I'm just getting better. Like, I feel better now than when I was 18 years old. I have better focus, better cognition, better energy, all the things. And same, I just want to keep going up. But, it seems like so many things change, because a lot of times I hear, and I don't have the answers because this isn't necessarily my specialty, but, that it becomes so much more difficult to lose weight. So I'm excited to get into all of that. But will you just tell us a little bit about your backstory? I mean, you've been doing this for so long. How did you get super interested, and what's been a little bit of your path?
I've never not been interested. I think, like you said, something I've always been interested in health. I grew up outside of San Francisco. I wanted to be a theater actress. I went to theater school when I was in high school. I had a full ride scholarship to UCLA for their theater department. And so I was always dancing and singing. And so because of that, I had a different vision of my body. Like, I saw it as a performance tool, right? And I got very, very interested in nutrition and fitness. And back then we didn't really, again, I was lifting weights with the high school football team and doing calisthenics and doing gymnastics and that type of stuff. So much more body weight stuff, except for really heavy leg pressing and chest pressing. But I just was always interested in that. I go off to UCLA on this theater scholarship, and I hated it because everyone there it was kind of the running joke that you were going to become a waitress and then maybe you would make it. And I thought, this is really dumb. Like, why would I go to school to become a waitress, to have something where I don't really have any, I mean, I may make it, but it's luck.
Yeah.
You know, you could be great, but what happened on multiple things I was trying out for is I was too tall. So I thought, this is not the smartest move. So why don't I go and start to learn some things instead? So I became an English major kind of by default, which was pretty funny. I was catering my way through UCLA, catered the 1984 Olympics. I saw Mary Lou Retton do her perfect 10. And I was doing English, and I was teaching aerobics at a little aerobics studio in Westwood when someone called up and wanted someone to come to their house and help them. And that was personal training. And as far as I can tell, I've talked to Mark Sisson about it. It's like me, Body by Jake, Tony Horton, first ones doing this. And so that's where it all started from. And then I thought, gosh, when I graduated from UCLA, I'm like, I had a full-blown personal training business then. So I went off to grad school because I was like, I better learn something about this, right?
Yeah.
And I've just been deep in studying and focused on it ever since. I am more excited today than I've ever been in this field. And it is the information that we know, you know, and all the tools that we have, it's incredible. And the research that's available to us. I mean, I think of the myths that I was taught back in school, that you shouldn't lift weights until you lose the weight.
Okay.
Right? I mean, how crazy is that? Everything was super. I've changed my mind a lot about caloric restriction, but everything was super focused on lots of cardio and caloric restriction. And fortunately, I had clients at the time, and I saw what it did to them. And that's when I started resistance training all my clients. I mean, way back, this was in the 80s. I was taking people to Gold's Gym on field trips and focused on weight training. And it was like such a weird thing that now is the normal. So I don't know, it's always been fascinating to me, and it's more interesting than ever. And here's the thing, even though we have all these new great tools, you mentioned interviewing Brian Johnson. I love the fact that he is spending so much money in open sourcing all of his information. And when you really unpack what he's doing, you find that the biggest needle movers are diet and sleep and connection and exercise and sunlight. They're not the prohibitive things where people go, I can't afford that. Yeah. They're the basic stuff. And that's what I think we most need to focus on, or what are the biggest needle movers before we start to major in the minors. What are the most important things that we can do? Because that will get you 80% of the way.
Absolutely. And, you know, having a platform as you do, people ask all the time, what supplements are you doing? What IVs are you doing? What are you doing here and there and whatever? It's like, okay, if you're not mastering, if you're not getting really high quality sleep, if you aren't eating really well and breathing well, I always tell people the same thing. It's like, what do you do the most every day? You eat, you sleep, you breathe, and you move. So if you can optimize those areas, then do not worry about getting an NAD drip for $700,000-$800,000 if you're, you know, eating trash at home. Like, for lack of better words, it's like you have to optimize those areas. So I couldn't agree more. And I'm also very excited because I've always loved like weight training, and you know, the more the better. I'm definitely like not at my peak because, you know, I had an explant, I had to take some time off, but now I'm getting back into it, and it's just, there's no better feeling. I love pushing myself.
It's so fun.
It's so fun. I love being strong. I mean, my grip strength is 99 pounds. I mean, you know, there's guys that I know that do it and they're like, wait, yours is what?
Okay. So don't you love it? This is, my husband always laughs because he sees it happening, where a guy will come over to the gym and he'll say, you're so strong. Now I just wait, because I know one of two things is going to happen. You're so strong. It's either going to be for a girl, for a woman, or for your age. Yeah. Sometimes they'll put both of them in. Oh. And I'm watching them because I'm lifting more than them. Yeah. Right? I'm like going, wait a minute, I'm just strong. Why do we need to qualify this?
I agree. I mean, I totally agree. There's been many a times where I'm like on a, you know, leg extension or something, and someone's setting between my sets and they're moving it down. And it's, man, I'm like, what are you doing right now? You know, it's just like, it's not anything insane to even start with. But no, I love that. So let's talk about a couple little points about what to do. So I'm 33, I'm in my 30s. I've done so many things that we've kind of talked about, and you do not need to do all that. You just need to master the basics. But what would you recommend in 30s, and then as you work your way into like perimenopause, and then we can focus a large chunk on this, on stuff you're doing? Because do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I already said I'm 61.
Oh yeah, 61. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't even know that. I wouldn't even, like, you look great. I mean, you're super fit. And I think the way you think about it is so important, because I hate the fact that we have, at my clinic all the time, people come in and they're like, my doctor just said I was getting old. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Fire your doctor.
It's horrible. It's
well, look at that mindset study that came out that showed that people who were excited and positive about aging lived 7.5 years longer than those who didn't. Yeah. I mean, when you have something like that, when you firmly know that your perception creates your reality, right? Yeah. That you've got to flip that script if you're thinking, oh, I'm just getting older. Like,
yeah. I love it's a quote essentially saying, we don't get old because we don't stop moving because we get old. We get old because we stop moving, right? And it's like, if you have this idea in your head that, oh, I'm in my 50s or something, I have to slow down. I mean, then of course that's exactly what's going to happen, right? You're going to slow down in all areas.
In all areas. It's this whole thing of the less you do, the less you can do.
Yeah.
The more you do, the more you can do. And it's why I have a very specific philosophy. I worked for a while in physical therapy, and my graduate work was in spinal lifting biomechanics. And I realized back then I was in an aerobics, training class, and they said, if you have a bad back, you should only do abdominal flexion, only crunches. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you do extension where you're weak? Well, because you could hurt your back. I go, in life, we have to squat. We have to get out of the car, off a toilet, carry things, pick things up. That's where we're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And so when you really look at all these things that happen as we age, you need to do more, not less, as you age. You need to push harder because you will get injured if you don't. As you age, we have fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers, as you know, and then hybrids that can go either way. Women predominantly have more fast or more slow twitch to begin with, which is why we don't have the bigger hypertrophy that men do. That's one of the reasons. But as we age, if we are going slower, we're like, I'll just do some Pilates and some walking. Now, they have their role, but they're not, the primary thing shouldn't be Pilates.
Yeah.
So if you're doing all these things that are much more slow twitch focused, the hybrids that can go either way will become more slow twitch. You're atrophying and losing fast twitch, and you're just slowing yourself down.
Yeah.
And then of course, the less you do and the less you can do, and then you get hurt doing something. And then people are afraid to go to the gym because they think they'll get hurt. But no, that's not where you get hurt. You get hurt in life. You go to the gym to train to get better at life. So you put yourself in controlled situations like picking up heavy things and squatting and pushing stuff over your head so that when you get on an airplane and have to put something in an overhead, you don't trash yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know why I went off on that rant, but let's go back to the 20s, the 30s. 30s are the perfect setup. And I know it's very hard to think proactively about, what's going to happen in your 40s and 50s. However, if you could just went, if I do the right setup in my 30s, it is going to be so easy in my 40s and 50s that I may not even notice much of this as it starts to happen. And once it does start to happen, when your hormones start to shift, you'll know exactly what to do and you won't really have the struggles.
Yeah. I love that.
That's possible.
That's exactly how I think about it. When I first got into this, it really was to be, more productive. I told you I started a business. And so I was like, how can I optimize myself so that I can work longer? I didn't really come from much. I didn't come from a healthy, necessarily food or healthy family. And I was like, I have to change that. And so that was my initial motivation. But now my motivation is, I'm going to be having babies, hopefully first babies at 34. And I want to be resilient and excited and energetic for them and just for life. So that's how I think about it now. And I think when people are getting older and they're going to the gym, they're not thinking about the way you are. They're not thinking about the fact that they have to do all these things with their bodies. So they need to condition it so that they can do that more easily. And the other thing too is and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if you think about it now in your 30s, how much easier is it going to be for me to put on muscle or anyone in their 30s than if you wait until you're 50?
So the good news is, and I saw this back when I was at USC with the 80 and 90-year-olds is, yes, you can put on muscle at any age. However, what you really want to be thinking about in your teens, in your 20s, I mean, another thing when I was younger is we were told that you shouldn't lift weights till you were at least like 16, that it could mess up your bone plates, and not true.
Yeah.
And I was always like, but how can kids do gymnastics but not lift weights? What's the difference? I'm not understanding any difference.
Great point.
Like, have you done gymnastics and done like any kind of high bar stuff?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
So it never made any sense, and now we know that's not true. But if you could be thinking right now, this is like your 401k. And just think if in your teens and 20s, you packed so much into your 401k that it was just easy to just put a little bit in from there on out, and you'd maintain and continue to even build. Mm-hmm. And it is just the same with muscle. Like, you want to pack in as much as you possibly can. And yes, your teens and 20s are going to be your best, but you can build muscle. Like, I've built more muscle right now in my last couple of years, and I'll tell you why, 'cause something happened that I freaked out about. But this really is your time to lay down, because if not, you probably heard the stats about VO2 max and muscle loss and strength loss and power loss. And they start around age 30, because it's when we start to make this shift from building muscle through hormones versus building muscles much more triggered by protein, leucine, and resistance training. And that we start to get a little resistant to it, probably because of all the metabolic health issues, insulin resistance, the inflammation, blocking muscle protein synthesis. But we'll start to, lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass every decade, which we don't have to do. Mm-hmm. That is if someone is not actively focused on building muscle. It's not really the problem, though. The bigger problem is the strength loss and the power loss. Like, you lose twice as much strength, 3 times as much power. And so you think about muscle size, how much muscle you have, which is important for insulin sensitivity, mitochondrial health, immune function, and then just, of course, protecting your bones. And then you think of how much strength you have. Like, what can you move? Like, you have to push something out of the way quickly. Can you? Well, that's power, actually, is moving it fast. Strength is what's the heaviest thing you can lift up. So this is all the stuff we want to train for now and hold on to. And when I was in my 50s, I was doing a little bit of this, like, well, it's great, I'm at the gym. I would kind of look at everybody else and go, I'm stronger than them, so I'm fine, right? But I wasn't pushing myself. And then that meme started to go around the internet. I don't know if you saw it, about how if you're over the age of 30, the chance you'll ever sprint again is
I saw that. I know.
Well, my husband and I decided to go to a HIIT class. Now, just like you said, you go find the fittest person and ask to work out with them. We go to the classes where we look like the grandparents and everyone's super fit. And so we go to this HIIT class that has sprint treadmills down one line and then these stations down the other that have like kettlebells and TRX and all this stuff. And you alternate between your sprint and the treadmill and the other station. So there's 2 people alternating back and forth, and they have you like sprinting, and then you're doing burpees, then you're doing kettlebell throws, then you're doing more sprinting. And I realized after doing that class, where I almost puked, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I was so sore for a week. But I did that, and then I also realized I was trying to get a lid off a jar, which I'm always the person that gets the lid off the jar at the house, but I couldn't get it. And I didn't think about it the first time, but the third time it happened, I'm like, what is going on? Because as you know, grip strength is a proxy for overall strength and, highly correlated with all-cause mortality, just like VO2 max is.
Yeah.
So, as we age, we'll lose that grip strength, we'll lose power, we'll lose muscle mass, we'll lose VO2 max, and we actually don't have to.
Yeah,
I mean,
love that.
You really don't have to, but you have to think of training for it. And that's where I think we mess up, is we don't train for it. And you look at when we were just in Europe, and I was at this gym training, and I look around, and every single person in the gym is sitting on their phone scrolling. No one's working out.
Yeah.
No one. So I just started, it looked like I was doing like little influencer selfies. I wasn't. I was taking pictures and videos of everyone scrolling. So I made a whole reel of people scroll working out. So it's like, what's going on here, people?
And then I think I see this all the time too, but it's like, I think then they go to the gym, they act like they actually worked out in their brain. Yeah. Then they eat more because they were like, oh, I went to the gym today. I worked out. Yes. It's like, oh no, you didn't do anything. Like, you know,
I literally watched this one guy next to me. He kept doing this. So and I went, you did 3 sets of bicep curls in the same amount of time that I did chest press, incline press, push-ups, snatches, pull-ups, bent over rows, upright rows. You did 3 sets of bicep curls, which are a vanity exercise that I don't even bother doing.
Yeah, I agree. Neither do I. But then it's like sad because you're actually wasting your own time for a lot of reasons. You're wasting your own health. You're wasting your own time. I love just being efficient at the gym and, you know, getting the most out of it. So I think people need to start learning to love the gym. I mean, if you can go to the gym, you're blessed, right? Like you have the ability to work out. You're in a great position, and you should embrace that and get the most out of it. That's how I think about it.
Well, if you set goals and you find a fun partner to work out with, and you can see yourself progressing, it gets a lot more fun, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm really like genetically, I can put on muscle pretty quick, and just because I have such a good diet, I can get real toned. Like even after taking 6-8 weeks off after the explant. I mean, I went from having an 8-pack when I got married to, that going away a bit, but then it just comes right back. So
and probably even stronger. I mean, there's having to take some rest here and there. Usually it takes something like having an explant to force you to do it, because it's like, I don't want to take a break. I had to take a break where they're like, you can't lift more than 10 pounds. Yeah. I'm like, okay, explain why 10 pounds. And it was, and so I kind of messed with that a bit, but you always come back stronger, right? Yeah. So it's not the worst thing. It just can't be very often.
Yeah, I'm still working on getting my push-ups back though, because it was under the muscle. So
yes,
I'll get it. Yeah,
you'll get it.
So okay, when you get into 40s, 50s, like maybe menopausal area, what can women do? Because I often hear that people are struggling with weight gain, and they're working out maybe the same amount, but they're not getting the same
and they're
results.
Not crazy.
Okay,
so that's the first of all, you're not crazy. I have a girlfriend who I hadn't seen her for 6 months, and we were meeting up, and she walks in and she's like, she'd put on, I don't know, like 6-8 pounds. She looked exhausted. She goes, I've just been so stressed. I can't believe it. And I go, really? What age are you? She's 47. I go, periods regular? No. I go, you're not stressed, honey. I mean, yes, you're stressed, but your estrogen is probably dumped. And if your estrogen dumped, you're going to become more insulin resistant. You're going to start gaining weight. Mm-hmm. So, I'll tell you an interesting story. I just went off to Europe and I had to change my thyroid medication. I ran out of one. The doctor called in a different one, and I leave for Europe with the new one. Mm-hmm. And 4 days into it, I'm 4 pounds up.
Wow.
And at first I'm like and I'm thinking, if anything, I'm eating less. Usually I go to Europe, I lose weight. Yeah. And all of a sudden I went, oh, it's my thyroid. She had me tweak the dose and it went away like that. Mm. And I just say that to emphasize that we are our bodies, yes, there's a bank account component, but ultimately we're a chemistry lab. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to look at all the different things that are going to make a big impact. Stress, when I think of what would you want to do if you were going to set yourself up so that as you go through menopause, it's as easy as possible. Number one, you would start paying attention to stress hormones now, because I think that the thing where women get in the most trouble in their 30s and early 40s is with stress hormones. Mm-hmm. It's because that's the time when we tend to be moms. And so we've got kids we're raising. And even though things are different than, like 50 years ago with men and women, we still are the CEOs of the house. Like, so we're running our businesses or we're working. We've got our kids. We're still taking care of everything at the house. It's just a lot. Yeah. It's a lot, and it's a lot of mental stress. So the first one would be really make sure you've got you know how your cortisol works. You've done an adrenal salivary index ideally, or at least you're monitoring it with something like HRV. So you really get a sense of what your body's like. So if things shift, you can fix it. Mm-hmm. Because that will then reflect on your thyroid. And quite often people start to have thyroid struggles because of their stress, or because of, they triggered an autoimmune with crappy diet and other stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the first part, because you want to make sure going into menopause, your adrenals and your thyroid are dialed.
Yeah.
And quite often your thyroid's the thing that starts to go down first.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't balance your sex hormones if your thyroid's not great. So you get that fixed. And then I think we should do a really good hormone panel when you're optimal. So late 20s, early 30s, you do a hormone panel, you know what ideal feels like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to work with a good functional medicine doctor as you start to go through menopause. Now, I was lucky that all my friends are hormone docs. Like my 50th birthday party was Dr. Sarah Gottfried,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Annika Becka, Dr. Jen Landa. It was all these hormone docs, right?
Yeah.
And the minute my hormones started to shift at all, I was on hormones.
Good. Yeah.
And that's really the takeaway too, is everyone's going to have a different fingerprint of this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, testosterone was the thing that went down first,
Mm-hmm.
then estrogen. Progesterone is something that if I take it, I immediately gain 12 pounds, break
Mm-hmm.
out and start to cry. So, you have to know your own fingerprint and how to use these things correctly. But if your estrogen's low and then you think, okay, I'm going through this, I'll just put on more progesterone and start to use more progesterone steady state, you'll get insulin resistant. You will have trouble building muscle. Women always think of testosterone for muscle building, but estrogen's really the key there for reducing inflammation. In fact, I don't know if you've listened to anything Dr. Vonda Wright's been talking about. She's a orthopedic surgeon who talks about menopausal musculoskeletal syndrome. And it is what happens as we start to go through menopause. We just get more inflamed.
Yeah.
You can't recover. So the more exquisitely sensitive, the more you get your body, you can see your temperature, you're monitoring your sleep and your HRV. You'll see these things shift.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be able to work with your doctor to be able to dose. Because when you're first going, when you're in perimenopause, hormones are all over the place.
Yeah.
So you got to adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
It's easy once you're through it, because then it's all steady.
Yeah. I think working with a great HRT doc is so important because it's so wild. We do hormone replacement therapy in my clinic, bioidentical, of course. But I've been encouraging my mom. My mom is 53.
Mm-hmm.
I've been encouraging her to go get hormones. And then she's talking to her doctor. And of course, she believes me at the end of the day. But her doctor is still caught up that, she
in the Women's Health Initiative?
Yeah.
She needs to fire that doctor.
I mean,
I don't normally say that, but I think if someone's not keeping up on the fact that the Women's Health Initiative was the greatest travesty to women, like there's a whole forgotten group of women. Thankfully, I have an amazing doctor friend who I send all the women to who are like 65 and up who didn't get on hormones and now are being told they can't. They can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
They actually can't. In fact, so I have Dr. Felice Gersh, who's out of Southern California, who does geriatric hormone replacement. So anyone 60 plus who wasn't on them, who was told the door is shut, it's not shut.
Yeah.
And the time you want to be on them is when they first start to drop. But this idea that they cause cancer, the research coming out is actually showing the opposite.
The opposite in every way. I mean, cardio.
Oh, yeah. Heart, brain,
everything.
Bones. I used to work at a cosmetic surgery institute, and they would send me all of their patients just to do lab reviews and look at everything. And I could tell before they told me what they were taking if they were on hormones or not.
Yeah.
Because if they were not on hormones and they'd gone through a menopause, or they're just even perimenopause, all of a sudden their their LDL shot up, their HDL dropped, they became insulin resistant. You could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Their CRP went up, so they just became inflamed, and they started gaining belly fat,
Yeah.
So you're not crazy if you notice that stuff. What you want to do is immediately, like, I just was doing a talk and this gal came up, she goes, I'm doing everything you're talking about. Like, I'm getting my sleep, I'm doing resistance training, I'm getting my HIIT training, I'm walking, I'm eating protein first, blah, 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 blah. She goes, but I cannot lose the weight. But I'm just don't want to do hormones. I want to do everything natural. I'm like, hormones are natural. Your body produces these. Yeah. What's unnatural about that? So you're doing everything. You can't get to where you want to be. What am I missing? Like, why are you not being nice to yourself? And you're hurting your bones and your brain and your heart in the process.
I mean, it's going to be like a no-brainer for me. I'm definitely, as soon as because why would you? That's just like the process of aging, right? Like taking its toll. And are you friends with Amy Killen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I love her. And she just did this video the other day that articulated it really well, because she was essentially talking about she came actually to LA and did this whole facial rejuvenation essentially with lasers and all this stuff. And I guess a few women commented like, why aren't you just aging gracefully?
And it's aging gracefully. Right. We're going to age powerfully.
Exactly.
What is wrong with doing these things?
And do everything to stave that off, right? Why be like so less than for such, and not less than like as a human, but like feeling less than for such a long time? That's horrible.
Well, here's the thing. Like, if you don't want to color your hair, fine. Who cares? If you don't want to do collagen treatments for your skin or whatever, and you're comfortable with that, that's fine. Like, but don't judge someone else who wants to.
Yeah.
Like, don't care, if you want to dress the way you want to dress, fine. These are just choices.
I know.
I don't know why. I don't know, like, the social stuff, when people get on and start attacking on this stuff, I'm like, really?
And it's always, the sad thing is a lot of times it's women attacking other women.
I know. I hate that so much. Just stop it enough. It's hard enough being a woman. Do not attack other women. Could we just agree and don't be judgy? It's like, if someone wants to pluck their eyebrows, let them pluck them. If they don't want to, don't care. If you don't like their hairstyle, doesn't matter.
I know.
Stop it.
I totally agree. Well, I love that. So when you went on HRT, and if women are on HRT, it's gonna make a big difference in the weight, the belly fat? Yes. Okay, good.
So for years, I've always been interested in weight loss. Now I call it fat loss and body composition, but I've always been so interested in it. And what I noticed early on with all those clients, and in my 20s, all my clients were between 35 and 60. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were 45 plus going through it, right? And what I noticed very quickly is the things we were being taught in school weren't moving the needle, that there was more to it than that. Yeah. And that's when I started to really explore, okay, obviously we have to look at the big things first. So, let's look at your diet, because if your diet's not dialed, guess what? And that's the fastest needle mover for really starting to lose that initial fat. But then let's also look at exercise, because long term, you've got to have that skeletal muscle. Mm-hmm. And then we've got to focus on sleep. And we know that just if you're not sleeping, you're going to be hungry or more insulin resistant. Mm-hmm. Stress and sleep go hand in hand. And then, of course, you've got to look at all the sex hormones and thyroid and toxins, which then the toxins look at the NHANES data where they looked at obesity, and they said obesity is not causing diabetes. It's the toxins in the fat that are causing the diabetes. It is toxins creating some of that insulin resistance. Then you've got the gut microbiome and leaky gut with food intolerance causing inflammation. So there's so many different things that you can look at. Mm-hmm. But again, I always want to get to the biggest rocks first. Yeah. And, that's why as you're going into all of this, if you've got your diet dialed.
How do you dial your diet?
So the first thing I like to start with is just doing an audit. So just having people get a food scale and use a tracking app and just actually pay attention to what goes in your mouth. Yeah. I will never forget, this was years ago, I had a client who was like, I can't lose weight, I can't lose weight, I can't lose weight. And we didn't have tracking apps back then, right? So she's writing it down on the paper, and I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. And she was with me at the gym 5 days a week. So I knew what she was doing there. Yeah. So I go over to her house for dinner. And as she is cooking dinner, I'm in the kitchen with her. She's yakking away, and she is stuffing her face. Oh. Stuffing her face like she is talking, eating, and I'm watching this, and she's eaten more. And then she's down and has a whole dinner. And I went, well, you're not even aware. You're not even aware that you did this. Yeah. And so that very first step is, let's just really look at what you're actually eating. Mm-hmm. Once you do that, then, and this all has to go along with, of course, body composition. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that there should be no scales. We always have to know what that weight's made up of. Mm-hmm. We've got to focus so much on holding on to or improving that skeletal muscle, and then really where the fat is. Mm-hmm. As you know, there's subcutaneous fat, which we might not like, but it's not hurting us like the visceral fat is, or the fatty muscle. That's a whole nother one. And But if we just started with, all right, let's focus on one thing first. Let's focus on making sure that we're getting optimal protein. Once we make sure we get optimal protein, which I think should be somewhere between 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight, and we're getting in at least 30 grams of animal, 40 grams of plant at a meal, and at least 100 grams overall. So let's just check in on that, get that dialed. That's dialed. Let's add in non-starchy vegetables. Then let's add in like a little bit of fruit. Then let's see how we're doing on fats. And then you have some options there. Like, do you have any issues with leaky gut? How do you do with things like, I'm not a fan of gluten. Like
I don't think I've had gluten.
It's like, I mean, in the U.S., it's basically code word for glyphosate. So that's the problem. But, are you someone that can or cannot handle dairy? Are you someone that, the whole first book I wrote with soy and corn and eggs and peanuts, and it was all because of leaky gut, which I was told back then didn't exist. I'm like,
it definitely exists. Yeah.
Thankfully now that's no longer a thing. But, so there's diets that are transitional, and then there's foundational stuff that you would do all the time. And then you might do transitional things. Like I think carnivore diet, I have a client on it right now just to help break his insulin resistance and heal his gut. And then we'll start to incorporate some things back in. So, you can use diets situationally for short term, and then you have your ongoing thing. And then if someone wants to lose body fat, or especially recomp, I push their protein up a little bit. I add in essential amino acids, and I do caloric restriction that cycles.
And what does that look like? How many?
So what I like to do, and again, this is only when they're tracking, they got to track, is I like to take it to, and I learned this one from Dr. Bill Campbell, who I think is amazing and is a neighbor. I take it to 25% caloric restriction. So if you know that you average, let's say 2,400 calories a day, you take 75% of that. So do easy math. Let's say you need 2,000 calories a day to maintain your weight. 5 days a week, you do 1,500 calories. 2 days a week, you do 2,000, and you just cycle that.
Is it a good way? So, because, to be honest, I have counted calories many, many years ago. I don't anymore. But if we have like a tracker like Aura and we see our total metabolic expenditure and we know we're maintaining at that weight, we would take that number. Let's just say it's 2,000 for me to maintain. And then you would just subtract 25% from that.
Yeah, but it's not going to be as accurate as if you really took for a week or two and recorded everything you ate, you would really know what it takes to maintain your weight. Now, I don't think people, there's a whole lot of different ways. And I used to never focus on calories because I knew that if I fixed food intolerance and focused on protein, that generally people kind of, they're full. It's the biggest reason I love to have people eat protein first is they're full.
Yeah.
And, and then they don't overeat.
Yeah, but that's why I don't even track, because my diet is very protein heavy, so I'm just not hungry.
Yeah, you're just not hungry. Yeah. So, but for someone coming into this, and I hear from so many women that they can't get enough protein in, which is why I tell them to eat it first. Yeah. Right? Because I went to dinner with a bunch of people after doing a talk about this. So the talk is eat protein first and then lift heavy things. And we go out to dinner, and I watched this woman sit down, and she was the exact role model that I would have been talking about in the talk. She was about 60. She probably was about 32% body fat, normal weight, maybe 5-10 pounds over, but normal weight, and that normal weight obesity that you hear about, where they're high body fat, low muscle mass, right? The sarcopenic obesity. And she sits down, she has a glass of wine, she starts having hors d'oeuvres. The hors d'oeuvres are like carb fat bombs, Yeah. I mean, it's like, except for something like maybe shrimp or lobster, most hors d'oeuvres are absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
Then, so she has the hors d'oeuvres, she has the salad, she orders eggplant for dinner, she has a roll. Oh. And I have like big steak coming.
Yeah, and that would be me.
I'm like looking at her, I'm like going, I've had no appetizer, I had a glass of wine, and I have this huge steak. And I'm like, I'm going to share my steak with you. She goes, I'm so full. I'm like, skip the eggplant.
Yeah.
Which is just the oil sponge, Yeah. And she's like, you're protein shaming me. I go, yes, I am. I'm protein shaming you because you just did exactly what I teach people not to do. Like, you stuffed yourself full of all this other things. And it's true. Like, if you sit down and eat 6 ounces of steak, or I'll eat 8, but I'm 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
I'm full.
Yeah.
And you're full for a while.
Yeah.
Like, you want a GLP-1 peptide, eat steak.
Yeah. I eat a lot of steak.
I do too. It's my favorite. Like,
there's an amazing, have you ever been to Matu?
What is it?
It's a restaurant here. You'd probably really like it. It's called Matu. It's grass-fed, grass-finished Wagyu steak.
Ooh.
I told you only 2 places here in LA, Air One and Matu. So
good to know.
Their tartar, first of all, we'll have to go there sometime.
Wow, and tartar, I'm so hooked on the creatine levels. And
the tartar is amazing. The bone broth is the best bone broth I've ever had. It comes in like the world's smallest glass. It's like a shot, but it's so delicious.
Wow.
And then I do the dinner for 2, and it's like this amazing steak, and it's all meat, and it's just
okay.
Great.
It's the dinner for 2 for you or for you and your husband?
For me, and it's a lot. It's a big portion. It's like 6 different courses, but both get tartar. It's so delicious. But I mean, yeah, I eat a lot of steak, and I of course incorporate like some wild caught fish and things of that nature. But my whole diet is pretty much protein. I'm never hungry.
No, I know. You're just not hungry.
And I wouldn't even think about eating a roll personally, but
I can't think of. Well, we just went to a 17-course 3-star Michelin star restaurant in Barcelona. We pretty much just ate everything, but that's the only time I can think of, and it was a 24-hour fermented sourdough something. We're like, okay.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you're just too full to do it.
I agree. And plus, I mean, the way I think about food is every single bite, I'm like, what am I going to get from this, right? Like, is this going to benefit my brain and my body and my focus and my future? I mean, I get that not everyone thinks about food like that, but if you could start to change because I mean, it's always like such a big joke. Fortune magazine just did this big article on my husband and I. And when we started dating, he sent me a picture of his fridge. Well, first I asked him for labs, which was hilarious, and everyone thought it was crazy. But then I sent him a bunch of labs. I sent him a gut test, a toxin test, all sorts of labs. And he sent me a picture of his fridge, and I like made little circles and sent it back. And
oh boy,
it just because he didn't really think about some of these things being bad, but he was he wanted to learn, right? Like he was all in, like completely all in. Our first date was in hyperbaric chamber. He knew exactly what he was getting into.
Same with mine. Well, I made him take a Colby, love languages, and one other personality test.
I love that.
It's like I meet him. I'm like, what are you doing pouring that in your shake? Like we do everything because he ate too much sugar and immediately and wasn't sleeping. He was sleeping 5.5 hours a night. Yeah, that's not going to work.
I mean, my husband was going to bed at like 1 o'clock in the morning, sometimes eating late. He was healthy, but he changed all that. I mean, his testosterone went up 200 points naturally. His total tox burden looks great. His gut health is great. He has better focus, more energy. We go to bed at 8:30 every night. It's like
you're a woman after my heart. So we just were in Spain and we were going out to dinner, and they go, okay, we're going to dinner at 10:30. I go, 10:30.
It's crazy.
10:30, like
10:30, exactly.
Yeah,
I had to go to an event the other day at 7 p.m. and it was 7, and then they said it was ending at 10, and it was a health event. And I was like, how is a health event until 10 p.m.? I have to be, so I like had to leave early. I was the first one to leave. But sleep is so important, and I totally agree. I want to talk about bone health for women because we know that women can lose bone mass, and the stats are crazy. Do you remember what the stats are if you break a hip?
Yeah. So over the age of 60, 65, if you break a hip, it's like a third of the people will die within the year. 50% will never come back to normal function. It's just insane. But here's the important thing. Just like we know that blood sugar is a lagging indicator of insulin resistance, so we should be testing insulin, obviously.
Yeah.
Bone mineral density really is a lagging indicator of poor muscle when you think about it. If you're doing everything you need to do to build muscle, it's highly unlikely, unless you've got some weird metabolic condition, that you will have osteoporosis. Now, if you've got like really poor vitamin D status and high cortisol and thyroid issues, all right. But reality is, if we really focus on muscle mass, then we are going to be exerting the pressure on our bones to help with bone mineral density.
Yeah.
And that is not just walking and doing some, light weights. It really is load your spine. Like, if you want to really push your bones, number one, squats and overhead presses, like where you're just axial loading your spine. So good. Yeah. Plyometrics. Back in the 80s, a girlfriend and I created a plyometric class way back when. It was when everything was aerobics. And the problem was everything you did back then were 60-minute classes. And this was 20 minutes and everyone was like on the floor dying. And we couldn't figure out how to position this class. Yeah. So bummer. But I mean, really, you want to be doing some jumping. You want to be doing some throwing. You want to do rucking with a weighted vest. You know, I think that's one of the greatest things. And where you live right now, oh my gosh, I go on rucking paradise.
Oh yeah, we love it. Because it's so hilly. So it's amazing. We love to go on hikes, and just even doing, you know, quick walking has been great for cardiovascular.
So when I think of exercise prescription, because that's really my first whole world was exercise phys, I like to walk people into it and focus on one thing at a time. And so like with diet, I say, like, let's track and then let's get protein dialed. Once we have protein dialed, we can start to look at non-starchy vegetables. We know we'll get some healthy fat with the protein. We'll see what else we need there. What about a little bit of berries? With exercise, just like you track with food, I like people to just track to start. Just track your steps. Yeah. And let's just make sure we're getting that. Like 8,000 is the bare minimum. Bare minimum. Like yesterday I was in the hospital with my husband all day, and a lot of it was like waiting for him to come out of surgery. I'm still like wandering, moving around, because I'm like going, I'm not going to have like the 3,000 step count. Well, even when we're flying and stuff, I like that is my bare minimum, but I really try to make it more like 12 to 15,000. Yeah. So first step is just making sure you're actually getting those steps in every day and not waiting till like 8 o'clock at night and going, oh crap, I need to go, to walk. So, and then adding some intensity with something like a rucking vest or hills. I now live in Florida, so rucking vests work way better. We have no hills. And then adding in that resistance training. But resistance training, you know, in life, we're not bolted to the floor. When you really look at why we're doing these things, we're doing these things to get better at life, to avoid those injuries, like to avoid breaking the hip. And so we need to be doing things that mimic things we do in life. Like I love like snatches because I'm going to throw something into the overhead. Yeah. Right. I love that too. Especially now because I'll like have a 70-pound podcast studio I'm throwing in the overhead. Right.
I love that. Well, I love Peter Attia has that kind of like checklist, right? Like things you should be able to do. I can't recall, but do we have one of those for women too, or is it just, I mean,
I don't know. I know, you know, I love his concept of the centenarian Olympics and what are you going to want to be able to do in your 90s and up. It made me really think. My husband and I went to Santorini a couple years ago, and I remember looking at this going, gosh, I want to make sure that I can do this in my 80s and 90s. I mean, everything's on hills. Yeah. Like you have to, there's no like handicap elevator to go up and down the stairs. Like you're got to be able to do it. And so, you know, when I think about what should you be training for, you should be training for what do you want to be able to do? When I lived in Palm Springs, I was meeting with a client and I go, all right, what are your goals? She goes, I want to be able to dance in my stilettos. I'm like, all right, got it. You know, you're 80. You want to make sure that you can go up and down the stairs in your stilettos. You can dance in your stilettos, which doesn't sound like a thing now, but it's like all of a sudden you're scared walking down marble stairs in stilettos because if you fall, you're in trouble. Yeah. And so what does that mean that you have to do now? Well, you better be able to squat, and you better be able to jump, and you be able to catch yourself, and you've got to have good balance. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to do the what would women want? Yeah. Because it's really the checklist of what are the things you want to be able to do in your life, right?
Yeah, it's like farmer carries, which would be like carrying a kid or something like that. Right. And, you know,
I think of it, I literally have been doing little things of my travel CrossFit. Because we travel with 70-pound suitcases. Like we load things. I know you can relate to this because our supplements and our, you know, it's ridiculous. And so we're in Europe and we have 4 suitcases, 70 pounds each, and our carry-ons and our tote bags, you know, and we're dragging these across things and throwing them onto trains. And it literally is, you know, CrossFit Olympics. But I want to be able to do that. Yeah. I don't want to have to rely. I was with a couple and they're like, oh, we can't, you know, lug our suitcases onto the train. I'm like, I don't want to have to not be able to lug my suitcases and toss them up if I, you know.
Yeah. What does your training split look like these days?
So it's been interesting the last 2 months because I've been traveling all over the place, which then it becomes like, all right, let's look at the next day and what things look possible. what's the gym situation? What am I going to do? I have in my hip pocket, so that I'm never screwed, I have my HIIT body weight workout, which will kill me. And I can do it in 10 to 20 minutes. So worst comes to worst, I like to travel with the TRX. So I always have that. Like I was just on a boat for 4 days in British Columbia. And I was like, uh-oh, I knew there was not going to be a gym.
Yeah.
And so I had a TRX with me, and I'm literally on the front of the boat. Now we were hiking during the days, but we were hiking during the days. So I had a TRX there too. So I was doing TRX stuff. I was doing push-ups. I was doing air squats and jumps. And on the front of the boat, I was doing up downs, jump squats, skaters, like a full HIIT workout, which they all thought was hilarious. So in my hip pocket, I always have that. Like I have, and I actually just recorded it for YouTube, of what you can do when you're somewhere where there's nothing, because you always have dips, you always have push-ups, you always have squat jumps, you always have skaters, you always have up downs, or burpees. You can always grab something and do a Turkish get-up. So there's things that you can do. If I'm left to my own at home, what I usually will do is upper body one day, lower. So I do upper body push and pull, and then hip and thigh hinging, squatting, and then some HIIT the next, and rotate. But I think I'm going to move it into doing, which is what I did today. So I was like, I can do this perfectly at this gym I'm at. Today I did full body. So I did pull-ups, and I did bent over rows. I did upright rows. I did chest press, incline press, overhead press. I did Smith squats. I did goddess squats, and I did lunges. And then tomorrow I'm going to do some HIIT training.
Nice.
So.
And you're training how many days a week?
I plan for every day, because I get usually something will happen someday where I can't do it. So, but in my perfect world, I train every day, and then I just see how I feel.
Yeah.
So if someday I just go, I have really killed myself, I will do like a much longer zone 2E type of cardio workout and just make it easy.
Are you doing anything for VO2 max specifically?
So this has been my current focus. Last year, my big focus was meditation. And then this year, because I don't need to focus so much on weights, because I'll do weights, that's my happy place.
Yeah.
Like I will always do those. What I have been focusing, though, on resistance training is adding in a lot more power. So doing more velocity, like high velocity resistance training. And then I'll also rotate in a couple times, like once or twice a month, I'll rotate in just absolute strength, where I'm doing 1 to 5 reps super hard, taking longer breaks. But most of it's done in like an 8 to 12 repetition, 5 sets, 1 warm-up set, 4 hard sets. Where I've been focusing more lately is on more HIIT, VO2 max style HIIT. So that 4x4 horrible lactate training, 4 minutes super hard, and then a minute, then 3 minutes recovery, push again. I got a sprint treadmill for home to do it.
Nice.
But that is like my unhappy place. My unhappy place is HIIT. I cannot stand it. So I alternate between a Peloton, a Stairmaster, an Exciser, and then body weight stuff, which I just found this in the literature. I didn't know it was such a thing, because I've been doing HIIT more as doing functional moves, and it's actually called high intensity functional training.
Yeah.
So where you can do HIIT training, but use things like squat jumps and up downs and things like that.
I love that. Yeah, I've been doing getting like really like dialed in on VO2 max too. I have a Carol bike. Have you ever seen
yes.
that? Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like getting you fitter faster, because it's resisting against, your own personal best. So.
Yeah, during the pandemic, we were out in Florida, then we came back here and everything was closed. I'm like, oh my gosh. So we found this one biohacking lab that we could go through the back door, and they had a Carol bike, and I was like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to figure out what to do, because I have a Peloton at home. I go, this is dumb. You cannot have a Peloton and a Carol bike. Like, just stop,
Yeah,
just use the Peloton and breathe.
Yeah.
But I think the Carol bike's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I incorporated like the 4x4 into my husband's workout. So he's been doing that too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's super fun. And we love working out together. But man, I've been running in the hills too, like 2 days a week. That
That's fantastic.
It's so good for you, but it's so hard.
It's so hard.
And it's so hot out right now. Like it's 90 degrees running like straight uphill. But I just think about how excited my body probably is. Like, because I'm just going to repair and be so much stronger.
You just have to push more than you're used to. When you think about what exercise is, my very first company was called Progressive Exercise because that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah. It never should get easier.
Yeah.
Right? Because you always are making it harder. Mm-hmm. Yes, the thing you were doing was easier. Now you have to do something harder.
Yeah.
And you just have to continue like that. And there's so many ways to progress. Mm-hmm. So, if you're used to doing 4 sets of bench press at 40-pound dumbbells and you're like, I'm stuck there. Well, then take the speed up.
Yeah.
Slow down the eccentrics, speed up the concept. Like there's all sorts of ways you can change things around.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what would be like 3 of your big takeaways for women in their late 40s, early 50s, struggling? We went over a lot. We talked about HRT and strength training and bone density. And what would be, any other points that you have for women?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to get a DEXA scan.
Yeah.
I wish that we would start that when girls were in their teens. Mm-hmm. So we get a good baseline when they're really laying down bone. Mm-hmm. But, when you look at most people, they get a DEXA scan at like 55 or 60. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So like if you're listening to this, go get a DEXA scan now. And if you are actively trying to shift your body composition, then every 6 months, if you're fairly stable, then you could do it once a year. What you're going to find when you get that DEXA scan is you're going to get your bone mineral density. You'll see if it's even. You'll get your skeletal muscle mass. Now it's predictions, mm-hmm. right? But this is the easiest way to do it. And then you'll be able to see if that's even. You'll see your overall body fat and your visceral adipose tissue. Then you can take this and correlate it with the bioimpedance machine at home, mm-hmm. which, yes, bioimpedance is not going to be as accurate. Because it's based on total body water. However, when you know what it's looking at, that's fantastic. So what you've got to do is get yourself a scale where it just reports to your phone on a Bluetooth and take the average over the week and look at the trend lines. Mm-hmm. And what you should be trending to is increase in total body water while you're dropping, body fat, because that's going to indicate better skeletal muscle mass. And then you correlate that with, are you getting stronger? But that's such an important thing for people to have, especially women, because we get so weird around scales. Mm-hmm. We just get just crazy about it. Like that is, I travel with a bioimpedance scale, so I can monitor all of this, and a food scale. So that is one that's super duper important. And then to just, and I know there was this whole thing about scales being a trigger, but I think they're a trigger because we're not thinking about it as a biometric tool. We're thinking about it as this, judgment of how good we are. It's got nothing to do with that. You would never look at your blood pressure and question your self-worth.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But yet we get on a scale and all this weird stuff comes up, and we just have to let that stuff go and look at it and go, what I'm really working on here is getting stronger. And so this is one way to do it. The other thing that we didn't bring up that, if I had to go back in life and do things differently, I would never have stopped stretching. I would have started creatine much younger. Mm-hmm. So that would be the other one, is I think creatine is one of these supplements that is so essential for women.
Yeah.
So essential for women. We have 70 to 80% less tissue stores of creatine than men. We tend to eat, foods that are not creatine rich. Because so many women have weird things around red meat, which I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like either. Such a great health food. Like you get polyphenols in it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, outside of liver, it's like the best in terms of like per pound nutrients, right? Or per ounce nutrients.
I feel so much better and I dabbled. I mean, I've been in this field forever. I was like a vegan, vegetarian. I've done like all this stuff. But creatine would be something very essential to build in. And that's another reason to check total body water, because likely you'll have more fluid in your muscles, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And if you aren't testing, then you'll freak out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I've loved this conversation. I think it's going to be so helpful.
I love everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I know. We'll have to get dinner or something.
Amazing. I mean, your clinic, it's fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Very cool.
Same, right back at you. And I love just women supporting women. I mean, we're all in this together, and we're all at different phases of life, but I just love learning from people who have already been here. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only, and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Kayla Barnes, does not accept responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of the information contained herein. Opinions of their guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.